everyone and welcome to today's Kerbal space program video, in which we're going to be taking this ship, the Cronus Mark 1. We'll talk about it more specifically once it's all built and you've seen it. We're going to be flying it to Eeloo and back again, because I didn't really know what to do for this week's Kerbal Space Program video because I've been very busy making other Kerbal Space Program videos. For those that aren't aware, I'm kind of working on the sequel, the conclusion to the Juno Attacks trilogy, as in the films I've made, Juno Attacks and Expedition Eve. The third and final installment of that trilogy is currently being worked on. I've got 4 episodes more or less finished now, and I want to have a lot of them finished and ready to go before I start uploading them. So most of my time for video making has been spent creating those videos, and so I've had to kind of been finding time to try and make regular Kerbal Space Program videos as well, so I can carry on providing you guys with the best Kerbal Space Program content. I think we can all agree. So yeah, that's why you might bear with me a little bit, but I hope this video will do, because you know, I was trying to think of what to do for this week's Kerbal Space Program video. I wanted to give Minmus a break, because I've been to Minmus a few times now, and I thought, where have I not been in a while? Where would I like to go? If I was playing this game just for the hell of it, just for fun, where do I find fun to visit? You know, I enjoy visiting Eeloo. Don't know why. I don't know if it's the challenge of it. I mean, it's not really that difficult once you know what you're doing. It's just because it's so far away, and it's quite... I guess people don't go to it that often. I don't really know. It's kind of an underappreciated planet in Kerbal Space Program. Not quite as much as Dres, maybe. So I thought, you know what? I feel like going to Eeloo, so let's go to Eeloo. That's a very long-winded intro, 1 minute 39 seconds, but that's the gist of what I'm doing here. So we're going for an Apollo-style setup. It's generally the best method for doing Eeloo missions, but I want this mission to be practical as well. The last time I did an Eeloo mission was, well, I've done a few different types. One of them was a Blunderbirds episode, which is just going to do a rescue mission on Eeloo, and the other ones were these hyper-efficient SSTO ones. One was just a 60-seat SSTO that didn't use mining or refueling, and one was an SSTO with no mining or refueling that landed on Lathe and Eeloo in one flight. It was a very draining mission, let me tell you. So this is notably easier than those ones, but I feel like it's a bit more practical in the sense that it's actually useful, and there is like, you would have motivate, there would be a good reason for you to do this mission yourself, because we're going to be netting a nice big chunk of science. We're going to bring, this is my science save obviously, so we've got a little lander there. It's got all the science kit on board, and we're going to just do some science gathering. We're going to be visiting various different biomes on this mission. And yeah, I mean, obviously there's not really that much point to it because we have the whole tech tree unlocked, but you know, it's nice to have bragging rights. And if in the future I decided to get to install some mods that necessitated having more science, or there was an update that added parts, which is unlikely, but if in the future if I ever needed science, we have some left up in reserve. Speaking of mods, by the way, you may have noticed on the vehicle assembly building UI, what's it called? Parts lists. There were lots of foreign parts. Those are just being used. Those may or may not be being used by Green Harvest. So that's why there's loads of different parts there. To my knowledge, this is stock, unless I accidentally clicked on a modded part instead of a stock one. I think this ship is fully stock. I don't know if I'm going to post the craft file, actually. I'm kind of winging this as I go along. I haven't decided if I want to share the craft file because, you know, I think it's good practice to build the crafts yourself. And I've shown the time lapse, so, you know, away you go. I leave it as an exercise to the reader. I don't know. Maybe I won't. We'll see. Time will tell. Well, I mean, you know, obviously, by just looking in the description, where you'll also find links to Patreon, Twitter, and Discord to get that squared off right there. And yeah, that was a kind of a weird tangent. So you may have noticed, I know it's not on screen now, but in the vehicle assembly building, you may have noticed me adding quite a lot of redundant features to this thing. For example, there's a big passenger bay. So we have 3 Kerbals in the Apollo style command pod, but then we have the 4-seat hitchhiker storage compartment as well, which doesn't seem like a particularly necessary feature because we're only traveling with 3 Kerbals, but I wanted to have a little bit of like sense of realism here. You wouldn't just send off 3 astronauts in just one tiny little command pod. You want a little bit of room to move around, so they've got 3 compartments to move between. They've got the lander cam, which will be docked to the front of the ship, so it will connect to the Apollo style pod. And then they've obviously got the hitchhiker storage bay, which in my imagination is just going to be where all the stasis chambers are, so they can go into cryogenic sleep. So they don't, you know, there's only so many times you can rewatch Neil Breen films before it just becomes too boring. So I'll give them some stasis chambers to, you know, go to sleep in. Nothing too special about the gravity turn here, so I didn't really feel like talking about it much because I guess you can kind of see it. And at this point, I'm guessing most of you know how to do gravity turns, and if you don't, perhaps Eeloo is a little bit beyond the scope you should be aiming for right now. If you want kind of more simple to follow videos or just easier missions to replicate, I would point you towards my Lowne Aerospace series, in which we kind of unlock the tech tree. I keep thinking about doing that again, but in career mode. I tried doing hard mode in career mode, which is like no quick saving, minimal science rewards, minimal money rewards, all of that, but it's just so boring. Like you do like one mission, you get no funds. You have to. It's a massive grind. It's very boring. I didn't think it'd make for very good videos, to be honest. So that's not gonna happen. I mean, I might just do like a regular career mode, but then impose my own challenges. For example, no quick saving or quick loading. Dead is dead. So I'll have to try and build. We'll have to try and build in like launch escape systems and making sure there are no points of failure throughout the mission. Other things might include stuff like, I don't really know. What would you do? What would you do for maybe add like some sort of life support model or something? I don't know. I'll think about it. The obvious one would be no quick saving and no reverting. But whatever. So there goes. You can see the scale of the Saturn V parts there. This was actually an SSTO launcher, so we can get the whole thing into orbit, and then we can just deorbit the main booster. Though I didn't put enough fuel in there to land it because, you know, we're a wealthy space program. We have built a hotel on Minmus. We're good for funds. We don't need to recover. There's a beautiful little shot of a Cronus Mark 1 there. So, yeah, I think I have kind of talked about everything I wanted to talk about with this ship now. It has those two giant solar panels there. Those are mainly there for aesthetic reasons because it has quite a lot of RTGs. For Eeloo, and to a lesser extent places like Joule, solar panels aren't really that useful because you're so far away from the sun that the amount of electricity you gain from solar panels is very, very minimal. You're much better off being served by RTGs. You can see here the lander, which is currently sort of clipping into the engines and not moving. So I just activated Time Warp to get it to naturally drift away from the ship. That's why the lander, though, it doesn't have any solar panels whatsoever. It just has a little RTG and plenty of battery power. So, you know, we're good for power there. Yeah, so all we're doing now, this is an easy way of getting a docking, by the way, once you're nice and close. Take one ship, target the docking port of the other, then use auto SAS to follow target, then switch to the other one and do the same for that. And you'll see they both just naturally maintain alignment, and it's a simple case of puffing with the engine once and then just watching them drift together. Doesn't quite work quite so well for space stations because space stations aren't really that mobile. They don't really move very much. And for a realism standpoint, it's probably not the most realistic thing to do, have the space station dock to the ship rather than the other way around. But for this sort of setup, it's fine. And as you can see, it's an Apollo-style setup. So for those that don't know, the Apollo-style setup was the main command pod, and all of that was at the top of the stack, but then below that was the actual Eagle lander, and then below that was the rest of the rocket. So when it would get into kind of Earth lunar space, the whole thing would have to reassemble itself in much the same way you just saw, where the front of the ship would come away from the lander, spin around, and then redock with the lander. So it's kind of in this sort of setup. It didn't work like we just did, where I took the lander and flew it around and docked it to the front, but logistically, that was the easiest thing to do in this case scenario. So, yeah, we're going to be doing 2 burns to escape from Kerbin because we only have 3 nuclear engines, which means that our thrust-weight ratio is not the best. It's going to take very, very long time to do any of the burns, and that's also why I set my apoapsis and periapsis nice and high, because I knew it would be dipping quite low. We'd be forcing that periapsis down. We wanted to make sure we'd be staying above the Kármán line. But yeah, it just doing the burn in one go, as you can see, would take way too long, and it would be very inefficient in terms of maximizing our use of the O-berth effect, which is, you know, burning as much as possible at periapsis. So just created another maneuver node, swung around, and then got our Eeloo encounter again. In fact, I forgot to mention this at the time, but you may have seen that this mission is now over a year in progress, even though we are still in LKO, and that's because I forgot to wait for a transfer window to get to Eeloo. Problem with Eeloo, it's at this tilted orbit, so it's quite difficult to reach anyway, and you really want to be leaving at a time when you're going to be getting a nice, easy encounter with Eeloo straight out of the bat without having to do any fancy kind of mid-course corrections, or at least not an excessive amount. We want to try and keep this as efficient as possible because Eeloo demands quite a large amount of fuel, so you want to be launching. Either do what I did and just wait for a transfer window when you're in orbit, or better, go to the tracking station and, you know, time warp up and wait for, if you imagine a line between Kerbin, the sun, and Eeloo, the angle that line forms at the sun would be 101.4 degrees, so that's kind of I overshot it a little bit, and Eeloo's probably more akin to sort of 95 degrees in my case, but for all intents and purposes, I think it's close enough. So you have to do a little mid-course correction here, because again, like I said, Eeloo's at this sort of tilted orbit, which makes it a little bit more challenging to get to than, say, the Mun or Juno or something. But not a problem, not a problem. So this is just kind of the easy way of getting to Eeloo, really. We're not going to be using any form of gravity assist, which is one of the things that people really struggle with in this game. So this is how you can do an Eeloo mission without, you don't actually need to do a dual gravity assist to get to Eeloo. This is how you do it. Just takes a lot more fuel. And the other thing I've kind of imposed here, because I appreciate that some people like following this, what's the word? This principle, this ideology, this rule. I don't know what I'm trying to say. But a lot of people commit to this where they don't want to leave any orbital debris in space, because it's not good, really, is it? And I've been trying to follow that with my space program as well. So this is a monolithic ship, and by that I mean we're not going to be dumping any fuel tanks along the way. We're not going to be leaving the lander in orbit either. So it made it a little bit harder. We had to cram a lot more fuel in than we otherwise would have if we'd gone with, say, an asparagus setup where we can dump empty fuel tanks as we go along, and thereby keeping our weight as minimal as it needs to be, and making things, essentially giving us more delta V. But I wanted to, like I said, I didn't want to leave anything in space, so this was what I had to do. So that's why it's kind of a really big ship compared to what other people have done. And obviously we're not using gravity assists, which is why, again, we need a lot more fuel than you would if you're doing a dual gravity assist or something like that. But here we are. Here we are in Eeloo. So we have a lot of fuel in that lander. You only need 620-ish meters per second. Probably want a little bit more, actually, if you're going to be rendezvousing as well. But it takes about, I'd say, about 700 meters per second to land on Eeloo and to take off from Eeloo. So you need about 1400 meters per second in total in your Eeloo lander if you want to be doing this mission properly. I have a lot more than that in my Eeloo lander, though, because I want to be doing several different biomes. We're going to be doing quite a few, so we're going to have a little bit of fuel left in that lander so we can hop around on the surface a bit more before we actually, begin our ascension. And we have that adapter you see below the hitchhiker storage module. There's like an adapter piece that has oxidizer in it. That wasn't a mistake on my part, forgetting to drain the oxidizer, no. We can actually use that to refill the lander so we can go back down to the surface for a second time, thereby maximizing the amount of science we can use. We could have just stuck an IRSU on the lander and just be done with it and be able to do the whole planet, but I thought, it feels a bit cheaty, and I just prefer this way. I'm a very old-fashioned player, you know me. So that's the general design of the lander. Now, you may be wondering at this point, let's get to Jebediah. There he is, smiling away. In fact, that's probably not Jebediah, is it? Maybe it is. I can't tell. The central one is Jebediah. There they are, looking very excited. But Jebediah, I'm afraid, is going to have to stay on board the mothership because we need to send a scientist down on the lander. So we're sending down Bob Kerbin. The reason we're sending Bob Kerbin, because it seems counterintuitive, right? Because Bob Kerbin can't create maneuver nodes, for example, because he's only a scientist Kerbal, not a pilot. There's a few other restrictions as well, but that's the main one. But the reason we're going to be using Bob is because he can restore these Science Junior and Mystery Goo things experiments. I don't know why I said things. He can restore those experiments so we can use them multiple different times, whereas Jebediah, once he uses the Science Junior and the Mystery Goo unit, they can't be used again. But if we use Bob, we can use them again. So not being able to create maneuver nodes is an acceptable compromise, I think. Is an acceptable compromise. I didn't actually think we'd be encountering this problem, though, because I have these antennas on the lander and on the mothership. So my plan was that, there we go, we deployed the little antenna there. The plan was that we could then communicate with the mothership, which can then relay us back to Kerbin, and thereby have a constant connection to the tracking station and, be able to create maneuver nodes. But didn't work. I think we needed a relay dish on the mothership rather than just a regular one. I should probably look these things up before embarking on these missions. So whatever. Like I say, you don't really need to be able to make maneuver nodes. They just add a little bit of quality of life improvement, so they are useful. But now I'm essentially just going to be doing everything a lot of times the same way. So I've sped up the footage a little bit to ×4 speed, faster than normal, just so this video doesn't drag on forever. One thing I forgot to do with this craft is I wish I'd bound all of the science groups to all the science experiments to an action group, so I could just hit, say, the number 1 on the keyboard, or any number you want, really. I'm not biased against the number 1, if any of you prefer other numbers. But yeah, you just hit a number on the keyboard and it will just do all the experiments, and then you can just click through rather than having to right-click each individual experiment to get them to run. That's the only thing I had to do, really. So there we are, planting the flag. I recommend wholeheartedly to plant flags every single time you visit a biome, so then you can mark it out. So you can see actually on the UI at the top right of to the right of the altitude gauge, you can see a lot of numbers. One of them says biomes, and it tells you what biome I'm in. So we could just fly around until that changes and then land in that spot. If you don't have Kerbal Engineer installed, which I recommend you do, but if you run on, let's say, like a console or something and you can't have Kerbal Engineer, then you can just either take your Kerbal out of the pod, right-click on him, or, you know, whatever it is on console, and do an EVA report, and it will tell you which biome you're over, or the Gravioli experiment, the gravity one, that tells you what biome you're over as well. I think temperature gauge as well, like the thermometer. I'm not sure which one. I know for sure the Gravioli does it, and I think there's one other one, but I'm not too sure which one it is. And, you know, I'm too lazy to look it up. I'm actually having to rush through a little bit because it's now 6:30 and I'm going for a meal with work, and we're meeting at 7. So I haven't got much time to get this commentary finished, so having to rush through. Also, it's my birthday today. Well, I mean, it's not for you, but for me, recording this, it's my birthday. So yeah, had a nice time playing Kerbal's space program all day. So yeah, lots been going on. So yeah, what I have, because I feel like I've kind of talked about the actual mission itself, haven't I, and the craft design. There's not much more I can keep saying about the same actions. So, I mean, what else have I been doing in my life? I've obviously been recording a lot of stuff for Green Harvest. I'm still not sure if I want that to be the final name, but I think it will be. Obviously, it's a work in progress name because Blue Harvest was the working title for Star Wars, the Return of the Jedi. Return of the Jedi, is that even what it's called? Episode 6. They filmed it under the name Blue Harvest so that fans would mob the set and, like, you know, overwhelm them a bit. So that's why I went with Green Harvest as a little nod to Blue Harvest, and that's why the Family Guy Star Wars is called Blue Harvest as well. But yeah, like I say, I've been doing a few things. Green Harvest is one of them. The other thing I've been looking at is reading up a lot on. Let me grab this paper. There we go. Yes, This is a scientific paper I'm holding by Thomas H. Mader, MD, et al. Optic disc edema, globe flattening, choroidal folds, and hyperopic shifts observed in astronauts after long-duration spaceflight. Let me tell you, it's a real page turner. Because I've been thinking about doing more like eye-related videos, because that's something I actually know a lot about. Like, I make all these space videos. I don't actually know anything about space, right? Like, Scott Manley, I ain't, right? Follow vintage space and all that if you want to actually learn true facts, not just my ramblings about anecdotal things I learned in Kerbal's space program. But I know a lot about eyes, because that's like what I do as my main, like, YouTube is my main source of income. Because I'd starve to death if it was. My main job is like working in eyes, so I know a lot about eyes, is what I'm trying to say here. So I thought, let's make more eye videos, because I made an eye video a while ago, actually, about when H3H3 and iDubbbz made that reaction video about Logan Paul's Enchroma color blindness glasses, and everyone was saying it was fake, and I'm like, yo, let me break down exactly how those glasses work. So, and I thought it was a lot of fun making that video, and I think people responded quite positively to it, so I'd quite like to do another one along a similar vein. And I thought this would be quite an interesting one, because it's quite a recent phenomenon, really, where astronauts have been returning from long-duration missions, and they find that their eyesight gets a lot worse, and when we do scans, there are like hemorrhages on the retina, like bleeds. The optic discs are very swollen and distorted, and the optic nerve itself can be quite warped, and the actual back of the eyeball is flattened because there's been an increase in intracranial pressure, which is like the pressure of the fluid that surrounds the brain and the eyes and the spine, etc. So it's all very interesting. And yeah, because that's the thing, the human body, it's designed to work with gravity. So when you're in a zero-G environment, things don't really work quite as well as they should. Like, obviously, I'm sure a lot of you are aware about muscular and bone dystrophy in astronauts. But then, you know, if you want to go to Mars, where it's a long, long mission, where you're going to be spending potentially years in space, you could go blind by the time you get to the red planet, because the eyes just need to work with the force of gravity. Like, the actual tears and fluids inside the eye have to drain away into the trabeculae meshwork, and that relies on kind of the downward force. Great docking, by the way, which relies on the downward force of gravity. Obviously that won't happen in space, so yeah, the pressure inside the eye could get too much and it could just kill the optic nerve. And then there's this issue here where there's just an increase in intracranial pressure and it causes the eye to become very swollen and again damages vision. So it's all very interesting times ahead. I think the main way this could be mitigated is by having like artificial gravity rings. Like, you ever seen 2001: A Space Odyssey or The Martian, or pretty much any kind of realistic sci-fi movie? It always has that rotating ring section to create gravity. I guess that would help mitigate it. But right now we don't have that on anything, so don't know what the solution's going to be. But that's going to be the main problem, I think, with long duration space flight, is that you're going to go blind, and a lot of other things as well. I think an extreme example would be I kind of went down this Wikipedia rabbit hole and I started reading about spelunking, and there's a cave in America called the Nutty Putty, which was sealed off in 2009 or 2011 because some guy died. And I'm not going to post any pictures on screen, but a guy died because he was basically crawling down this little tunnel head first and got stuck. But he got stuck upside down. And there's a massive rescue mission that came in and they couldn't get him out. And he eventually just suffocated because fluid just couldn't drain properly. So all of the fluids in his body just went straight to his brain and to his lungs. So he couldn't breathe, and then the legs weren't getting enough fluid. So when they tried to pull him out, it just his legs tapped the top of the cave, and he just screamed out in agony because his legs weren't getting enough fluid. So they were just super, super sensitive. They might have been able to get him out if they broke his legs, but the shock of that would have almost certainly killed him. So unfortunately, it's a really sad story. So yeah, he died, and the cave was sealed shut with his body still in there. So there's an extreme example of what happens when you have a human body that isn't in a normal gravitational environment. It wouldn't be quite that extreme in space because he was actually upside down and in a normal gravity environment, so everything was actively flowing downwards. That's not really the case in spaceflight, but there's an extreme example of what happens to the human body when it's not in an Earth-like gravity environment. So that's going to be a major thing in terms of our ability to explore space. So yeah, this was kind of not a weird tangent, I guess, because it was kind of space. But talking about the video game briefly, ran out of fuel here. I didn't do a very efficient ascent, and I didn't do a very efficient job at matching orbits with the mothership. I probably could have done it if I'd actually put a lot more effort into it, but I thought, I just gotta get this done for Saturday, So, I just finished off the rest of the rendezvous using the mothership, and again, it was made a little bit difficult because I couldn't create maneuver nodes to optimize my orbit, so just nothing really came together on this occasion. But luckily we had enough fuel in the mothership, and we can still do a little bit of maneuvering using the lander because we have some monopropellant in those tanks still, so we can use the RCS thrusters to get a little bit of control of the lander itself. But yeah, just doing my lazy Matt Lowne lazy docking method of just kill off all your target speed relative to the target by burning retrograde relative to the target on the nav ball, burn towards the target node, and then burn retrograde, and then burn towards target, then burn retrograde. Keep repeating that, and you'll eventually encounter the target. It's not the most efficient way of doing docking, but it works. So when you want to just get it done, you can just get it done. So we're going to keep the lander attached because I want to do for a few things. I want to get some science from a space high above Eeloo, which we forgot to do when we will get on the way here. So we'll keep the lander attached whilst we're in space high above Eeloo so we can get some more science. But again, I don't want to leave the lander kind of floating around in space. What I should have done was put a relay dish on the lander so we could just leave it in orbit around Eeloo and have it serve as a deep space relay, or put a probe core on it so we could crash it into the planet's surface. But I didn't do either of those things. So I thought, well, let's not just leave it like as a dead weight in space. So we'll take it back to Kerbin with us and we could just destroy it in Kerbin's atmosphere. So yeah, unfortunately, this ship's not going to be around much longer. The Cronus Mark 1, we will be missed. He had a family. It was very sad, but it's all in the name of science. Luckily, obviously, the command pod's going to survive, but that will be the only thing that will survive in this ship. That's one of the nice things about returning to Eeloo that isn't in a ship that isn't an SSTO, because this was always the most stressful part. Well, obviously it still is. Whenever I'm doing an SSTO mission to either Joule or Eeloo or something, the worst part is trying to get back to Kerbin, because usually you're coming in at such a high velocity that you can't safely re-enter. You'll just explode on re-entry. So you kind of have to do like several passes of Kerbin, but you have to get it quite precise. So you get gravity assists to slow your orbital velocity down. So I generally swing by Kerbin once or twice to kill off the bulk of my orbital speed, and then you can just about survive re-entry after that. But I don't have to do it this time because we have a heat shield, because we don't need to save all of the components on the craft. So I enjoy doing missions like this. I really like the actual finished product of my hyper-efficient SSTO missions, but they're stressful to do. I don't always enjoy doing... Well, I guess I do enjoy doing them, but, like, they're not fun. They're just very, like, can I do it? Can I do it? But once you've done it, it's the best feeling in the world. But it's a very stressful experience. Whereas this is just, just nice, casual, just have some snacks on the desk, just sit there playing. It's great. Nice and fun. So yeah, I hope this video served as a good, I don't want to say guide, because it's not really a guide, because I didn't really talk about anything in depth, and all of the footage was played quite fast, but just as a nice casual little playthrough showing how I would go about getting to Eeloo the quote-unquote easy way. But yeah, all we need to do now is get a nice low periapsis, and I thought what I'd try and do, I haven't got there yet, but I detached my engines and lander at the very last second so we could get a nice fireworks show for our Kerbals, who are now, what did I say, 8 years? 7 years? I can't really see the screen, it's very blurry on my preview monitor. So yeah, just doing the final bit of killing off our speed using the nuclear engines, because we still have over 2 kilometers per second of delta V left, so we use a little bit of fuel to slow ourselves down, and then we can get everything detached and look at those fireworks go. So hopefully the Kerbals, they've aged a bit, but hopefully it was worth it to see these spectacular fireworks. But there we are. Parachutes deployed. So I guess that pretty much wraps this video up. So if you liked what you saw, please do leave a like and subscribe if you would like to. There's also links to my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon in the description, as well as on screen in a second. And yeah, actually, before we do finish off, we have one more thing to cover. I'm sure a lot of you are wondering, how much science did we get from this mission? Well, I can show you right now. We managed to acquire a massive... Wait for it. Why is it taking so long? I should probably cut this out. Oh, I'm too lazy. We'll keep going. Oh, there we go. Right. 13,000. Over 13,000 science units. So, successful mission. And there on screen now are some links. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed... Goodbye.